to me, it's always been interesting about, well, what does the great patriarch fear? I'm Ashley Tindall. I am a filmmaker and writer from Los Angeles, and I'm an Aquarius. And no, I'm not available. You choose to go into documentary because you are curious. And, I chose to go into it because I wanted to advocate for people, tell other people's stories, to empower them, to get an audience, a mass audience, to feel empathy and to act on behalf of others. And I think fundamentally, most people in documentary, that's why they go into it. That's the driving passion. We fundamentally want to help and advocate for other people. And I think there are still people in Hollywood that rely essentially upon a passive mass audience to perpetuate terrible stereotypes and terrible dynamics. And this still happens even within documentary. And so I worked for one documentary filmmaker who, we were making a film about a very famous band. And, I was leading the research team for this. And so I was pulling in archival footage of this band. And unfortunately, in some of this archival, as we were logging it, and I was there with the assistant editor, we absolutely saw material that was pedophilia. It was about this band abusing young girls, and we were watching it. It was unbelievable. And I said, I'm not doing this. There's no reason for us. We're not going to use this in the film. There's no way HBO is going to let this in the film. So we need to stop. I don't need to be watching this. The assistant editor, who is a woman, does not need to be watching this. And the supervising producer, who is a woman, said, no, we do not need to be watching this. And the director essentially said, no, you will do this because I'm telling you to do this. You will watch this abuse, this pedophilia on film, and you will process all of this for me, your male director, or essentially you will lose your job. Well, we all quit because fuck that. In the last few years, I've shifted away from, well, not away, but I still work in documentary film, but I've wanted to write more and more television, and there's a reason for that. And so I decided I wanted to write a television series called Blood Sisters, and this is my reimagining the French Revolution through the eyes of two of the great feminists of all time, Olympe de Gouges and Mary Wollstonecraft. And so they get a chance to go back in time after their death, and they get to change the course of history. And in doing so, they decide they need to find allies. And so they find, among actual historical figures, many of whom are women that have been somewhat lost to history, although if you dig, you will find, great biographies of these women. But they decide they need allies. And so Mary and Olympe recruit allies, and they become the Blood Sisters. Primarily, they share the rising blood of anger. And so for me, it's the blood, when your blood rises because you've had enough. You cannot wait around and let somebody else do the right thing. You are now going to take matters into your own hands. And in my television show, this manifests in violence. And so the blood then is not just the rising blood of the women or the blood that they might share or their menstrual blood. It is the blood they take from men. And I think in some ways, using storytelling to challenge our assumptions about violence allows women to tap into what could make them fearless. If feminism is about challenging the status quo, and the status quo is about telling women that they have to live in fear, they have to move in fear, they have to be fearful in their own bodies, that we are vulnerable, then challenging that is, what is it to be a man who lives in fear all the time? And what if women were able to walk the streets with complete fearlessness, but men had to check behind their back? Men had to wonder if they were being followed. Men had to wonder if they were sending off the wrong signals and that somebody might take advantage of them. So in no way am I advocating that women actually perpetrate violence on men, but you get that feeling of like, oh, I want to be part of the Rebel Alliance, not the Dark Empire, right? In some ways, I want you to feel like you are a blood sister, that you have joined this sorority where you, through supporting each other, through challenging assumptions, and most importantly, through not being complicit in the denigration of other women, in the abuse of other women, in the in letting other women choose mediocrity or not take control of their lives. If you are part of a sisterhood that supports each other, no matter what, in femininity, in life in all of its manifestations, then you are being complicit in a better new world order and not in the failing patriarchy. So I don't remember feminism as a word that I had to learn. I just knew it. But I remember feminazi as this thing I was not supposed to be. I was really fortunate to grow up in a family where not only did my mother work, she was a professional, but both my grandmothers did as well. And so I don't honestly remember when I first heard the word feminist, because I think it was just around me. But I do remember my father, who was the son of a single mother, was married to a very strong working woman who's an attorney and had 3 daughters. He had this way of potentially, I mean, maybe it was a joke, but I'm not actually sure he was joking. I think it was a real fear on his part. He would say that he just didn't want me to become a feminazi. He had this thing that feminists would be radicalized and they would be so angry and they'd be burning their bras and they'd be hating men, that this was an unpleasant way to be. And I did not want to be a feminazi because that would be so terrible for my life. You know, I probably wouldn't, get a boyfriend if I was a feminazi. So to me, actually what made that really interesting was that then I got really into, well, what's patriarchy? And so I remember learning patriarchy through the church and being really interested in what are these messages that make men afraid. They're afraid of feminazi. They're afraid of, betraying God and, being punished in hell. And so, men are afraid of the structure too. And they're afraid of women who defy the structure. And so to me, that was great. I really wanted to challenge patriarchy. The first book that I really remember challenging my idea of feminism was a book that either my father or my mother gave me, and it was Sojourner Truth's Ain't I a Woman? She just, she's writing or making these speeches in the 1850s, and it's challenging the structures. It's challenging patriarchy. It's challenging what men think about women, but it's equally challenging what white women thought about black women, about enslaved women or formerly enslaved women. And so to me, my early understanding of feminism was not just about, the equal rights between men and women, natural, legal, but it's always been tied up with the shared oppression of women of color, white women, all people who are oppressed in a patriarchal society that's not being challenged. And so to me, Sojourner Truth was probably the first feminist that really introduced to me the idea of it's actually oppression that we have to talk about. If feminism is about challenging the structures that we live in, and we recognize that all of these structures have been built by men, and whether it's legal, medical, carceral, these structures have been built for men. They think they assume a male point of view, and they're built to perpetuate the power of men. And so therefore it is our responsibility to change these systems, to remove these structures, to recreate structures so that they fit everyone, the human corpus. And so we can't wait for men to do this. We can't wait for somebody to come along and say, how might this better suit you? Because it's never going to happen. So we have to take it for ourselves. And so this is one reason I'm very interested in fearlessness and in creating characters that do that. I don't know that women should look to men to pay reparations. I think I'm at a point now where I believe that women have to take what they want.